Your go-to sports talk from your own backyard. This is SS Tampa Bay.
How's everyone doing? I'm Harrison Smatchvitz alongside Zach Seifter, and this is SS Tampa Bay Sports Podcast. You know what? We got Gronk, we got the draft, we got sports coming back. Zach, are you ready for this?
Oh, man. I mean, I am so thrilled about, not only what's happened this past week, Harrison, with the Bucks, the draft, Gronk, but what's coming up on the horizon. Like you said, we got sports, we got news on potentially some sports coming back, the NHL and the MLB, and the NBA is ready to open up their facilities starting May 1st. It looks like we're finally starting to see a small light at the end of this tunnel. Not to say that this isn't still a very serious virus, but it looks like we might start to get some sports back in some capacity, which to a lot of people is a very big deal, and we're thrilled.
Yeah, and I just want to point out for people listening to this podcast, all the plans involve no fans, and hey, that rhymed. Yeah,
it does.
Health is a priority for everyone involved, 100%.
But it's sports, and we will take it in any capacity.
100%. I was talking to a buddy on the phone earlier. He was like, I'm not going to be able to watch the Bucks in person. I might not be able to watch college football. I'm like, dude, if it's on TV and it's happening, I'm ready because it's live sports. I watch most of my games on TV anyway. You catch a couple games a year. I can wait to go to a live event as long as I can keep my old routine of watching sports. And they're doing it the right way.
Well, let's be perfectly honest. Let's be perfectly honest. At this point, it's either, I feel like the situation has come to with a lot of sports. You either watch it on TV or you don't get it at all. And sports on TV is a much better alternative than everything getting canceled for the months upcoming. So you know what? We will take it and we will watch it. But Harrison, let's get this thing started. Let's kick it off with our Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had one hell of a week.
They might have had the best week of their lives since 2002. I'm telling you. And I know that's jumping the gun a bit because I'm comparing a trade to winning the Super Bowl, but the Bucs haven't exactly done much in the last 18 years. So, yeah, I would say it's the biggest thing since January 2003 if you want to get to the exact dates.
It's like, and for those that don't know what we're talking about, of course you should know what we're talking about, but you know what, for the small few, the ones living under a rock, the Buccaneers traded for Rob Gronkowski, arguably the greatest tight end to ever step onto a football field. And like I said, everyone should know, but, we don't know who's listening. But the fact of the matter is, it's Brady, it's Gronk. We haven't even gotten into the draft yet, but think about the weapons on the field. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They already had O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. They just added Rob Gronkowski to the mix, and they didn't give up anything besides a fourth-round pick that they didn't even have a month ago. It was a comp pick for the Quan Alexander signing in San Francisco. This team, some people say that Bill Belichick got fleeced. In the end, he got a fourth-round pick for a player who wasn't going to come back, who was retired, so he did the right thing. He honestly got something for nothing, which is great for his part. But the Bucs just got a Hall of Fame tight end for a fourth-round pick. And I'm just waiting for this to kind of blow up in their face almost.
Either way, I think it's a win-win for both teams. You have a situation where the Patriots got a fourth-round pick out of it, like you said, and just for the cost of a fourth-round pick, you get the rights to Rob Gronkowski. It was worth gambling. He would even come out of retirement because at the worst, you gained the seventh-round pick for the opportunity. You can now do double tight end sets with Gronk and Howard or Brate. Have them on the field with Chris Godwin and some of the other players we'll talk about after when we get into the draft. I'm really excited to see where this goes because we have a new quarterback, a lot of people. That's really the best way to say it. Because I don't want to just repeat everything from the last podcast.
You mentioned the fact that just the fact that they could attain Gronk's rights. I'm going to be honest; they aren't making this trade unless they know they're getting Gronk back. Gronk has known that he was coming back for some time. I think since Brady signed in Tampa Bay, I think he went right up to Bruce Arians and he said, "Listen, I'm coming aboard, and I'm bringing this man with me." And it took a while to get the trade worked out. It took a while for things to get worked out, but Gronkowski is here. And like I said, it's almost like this has been such a great month, off season of Buccaneer football. We're all just sitting here like, this can't be real. This can't be real.
I still don't know if it's real. I could wake up in like 2 seconds and it's suddenly like February again. And I'm like, oh, well, that was a pipe dream. Because the whole thing is a pipe dream. I remember
when was the last offseason the Bucks added 2 Hall of Famers?
Never. We had to make our own every time. And that's the thing. 3 weeks ago, when I first heard anything about Gronk to the Bucks, I was like, I'm not getting my hopes up. This is crap. This is a pipe dream.
I blew it off.
I'm not taking it for granted. And then suddenly,
I blew it off. I'm like, the Bucks have 2 tight ends. They don't need Gronk. He's expensive, which the $10 million salary cap hit, it's not pretty. They can work around it. They can work around it. There's a million ways to move cap space, all right, to move money over to make things work. So they'll make it work. But I mean, I'm like, they have 2 good tight ends already. They have Braden Howard. What do they need Gronk for? I mean, he's been out of the league for a year. I mean, who says he even wants to come back? And why would he choose the Bucks? But at the end of the day, it's like the Bucks. Tom Brady does a lot of things for you when you have him on your football team. And Gronkowski, I mean, I know he's been out of the league for a year, but it's like if you even get 80% of what he used to be, you're still getting a Pro Bowl tight end.
And that's another thing, too, about Gronk. It's not necessarily does he want to come to Tampa Bay. He wants to be back with Tom Brady while away from Bill Belichick. We've known this was his plan for a while. He retired because him and Belichick were butting heads a little bit. And by the time the last Super Bowl was won for the Patriots, he wanted out. So when Brady left, he was like, well, here's my chance to come back. There's a reason why the guy's been working out and trying to stay in Pro Bowler shape because he knew he wasn't done. He's only 30 years old, and I know there's an issue with concussions and injuries, which is why a lot of us thought he retired in the first place. But, now we know.
Well, that's where the year off comes into play. The fact of the matter is this guy, Rob Gronkowski has taken the last year off of football, and a lot of those lingering issues, a lot of those lingering injuries that, were affecting him in his last season where he didn't have a Gronk-type year, still a very good year by most tight end standards receiving the ball. I believe he had over 600 yards off 45, 50 receptions, something around that. He only had 3 touchdowns, which is a bit shocking. I mean, he definitely showed up in the playoffs, but they're low numbers by Gronk standard, but good for a tight end standard. But those lingering issues that he had, those injuries, his body was just beat up. He's good to go now. He took over a year off, and he's healthy. He said it himself. He's like, this is the best I have felt in years. He's going to put on, he's only 10 pounds under what his playing weight is. He'll put on those 10 pounds. He'll be ready to rock by July for training camp, get to know the playbook, get to play with Brady. And you know what? You're going to see a rejuvenated Gronk. You're going to see a healthy Gronk. And I think he's going to be extremely effective.
And before we move on to our next subject, Zach, did you know that any moment in this season he could lose his 24/7 championship?
That's true. He just got to get pinned by one guy.
Right? The second he's taken down the 40 on the first pass, there's a new champion. The WWE is going to be like, oh, and Gronk dethroned.
I'll tell you what. If they allow fans at training camp, I might run out there myself and go tackle him and be like, I'm the new 24/7 champ now, baby. Give me that belt. So, we'll see what happens. We'll see.
No
I'm not saying I'll do it. I'm not saying I won't. But, hey, it's out there. It's a possibility.
No, if you run a Gronk, I honestly expect you to smack into him like it's just running into a wall because it's Gronk.
I mean, obviously, my odds of tackling Gronk are not great. But that's why you go for the legs. And I'll come up from behind. I'll swoop the legs. I probably still won't tackle him, but it's worth a try.
Just be careful with those legs. He's had some knee issues in the past, and if you cost the Bucks Gronk, we're gonna have a problem.
I don't think Bruce Arians would be very happy with me if I took out Gronk's legs. So you know what? Let's scratch that entire plan. Let's move on.
I'm just gonna talk you out of it during our podcast now, so we don't have this issue like on episode 25 called Zach ruined Gronk.
Listen, if the headline is Zach ruins Gronk, I think it's going to be on a lot more than just our podcast. I think a lot of people are going to know what I did, and I'm not going to be very popular among
them. Your mugshot will be on ESPN for the next 5 weeks.
I'll be the most hated man in Tampa, all right? So let's move on. Let's go to the draft.
Yeah, okay, so, of course, if you live under a rock or you don't follow football that well, they just had their 3-day draft. All 7 rounds are done. The Bucks got 8 picks out of it. Sports Illustrated gave them an A- rating, and that's pretty good. It says a lot.
You know, a lot of people are saying it's the best draft that the Bucks have had in years, and quite frankly, I thought last year's draft was the best draft they've had in years. They got several, rookies, who were effective, and I thought last year they hit the ball, they nailed it. Devin White looks like a future stud. Sean Murphy-Bunting looks like an effective corner. Had 3 interceptions. I think he led rookies in picks. Jamel Dean started 5 games, and he was top 5 in passes defense. Mike Edwards, he needs some work, but he showed flashes here and there at safety. And, you got a kicker in Matt Gay who, struggled at times, but for the most part throughout the season, I felt was relatively consistent. We had a bad game against the Giants. He closed the season on a sour note against Atlanta. But I felt, the rest of the season, he was relatively consistent the other 14 games. He was a rookie. I feel like he got something to work with.
Very high ceiling. That's the good thing. If you can raise that floor a bit, because sometimes that floor, honestly, is a 0. I've seen him miss PATs. But dude can hit a 50-yard field goal. If you can hit
No. He can hit a 70-yard field goal without pads.
70-yard field goal.
I was at training camp all last year, covering the Bucks. And I saw this dude line up for, 65-yard field goals in practice and nail them. He's got a cannon of a leg. 50 is not his limit. In the NFL.
From what I see is only from the games. You got to see that insider stuff. I have not. But listen, I'll take your word for it. You got to see a lot of stuff I didn't, man.
Yeah, and then to finish off the draft last year, Scotty Miller, he had some injuries. He had some issues, but he's a receiver that the coaching staff is relatively high on. And I felt like I saw a bit of improvement in the second half of the season. So I felt they really nailed last year's draft. They did a lot of really good things. So for people to sit there and come up with this year's draft class and say, this is the Bucks' best draft class in a long time, obviously, time will tell, and we'll see how these players, progress, how they play on the field. We don't know what's going to come of it, but, just from my point of view, my eye test, I thought the Bucks, they nailed it again. Jason Light and Bruce Arians, this combo, hopefully they're 2 for 2 on draft classes.
I agree, and I'm not going to lie, I wasn't familiar with a lot of these names going into the draft, but I did my research, and I think I'm very happy with what Bruce Arians and Jason Light did going into this. So, you ready to talk about them?
Yeah, well, let's start with round 1. Tristan Wirfs.
Right? I thought I'd go in reverse order. I thought I'd go in reverse order just to mess with you.
Yeah. Let's start with the guy that people want to talk about.
Yes,
first round.
I'm kidding.
First round, Tristan Wirfs. The Bucks trade up from the 14th overall pick to the 13th with the San Francisco 49ers. The reason they did that was the 49ers had a couple of other suitors for that pick, trying to trade up and possibly take Wirfs from the Bucks, and the Bucks were not having it. It cost them another 4th-round pick, but they got the guy they wanted. And a lot of people, including myself, are incredibly surprised that Wirfs fell that far.
Yeah, and you know what? It kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that we were both surprised Andrew Thomas went that high in the draft. Well, I'm not going to lie. That's who I thought the Bucks were going to take for about 3 weeks. And I think Tristan Wirfs was going number 8, I think, at one point. I looked at some of the projections.
I had him going forward to the New York Giants. I did. I thought he was the best tackle in the class. He's by far the most athletic. He's well over 300 pounds, and he ran a 4.85 40-yard dash at the combine. And I think the combine is a load of hogwash. I think it's a glorified workout. But that kind of speed and that kind of athleticism, you just don't see in a lot of tackles. He's insanely strong. He's strong in the running game, strong in pass blocking. He was the most NFL-ready tackle in this draft out of the top 4. He's the best coach because Iowa is a football factory for offensive linemen. And their head coach used to be Bill Belichick's offensive line coach over in Cleveland, back when Belichick was coaching the Browns in the 90s. So, they coach offensive linemen very well over there. Wirfs, I thought, was the best coached, most athletic, and overall best tackle in the draft, and he fell right into the Bucks' lap. I saw a statistic the other day, said that there was a 2% chance that Wirfs would be there when the Bucks were up. And he just happened to fall into their laps.
The extra 2%, man. That's all you needed.
Yep.
And what's probably the best part about Wirfs, looking at it, he ran a 4.85 40, and he weighs 320 pounds.
Yeah, like I said,
He might be
insane
big.
athletic
The man is
freak for his
athletic.
size.
That's a lot of muscle on that dude. Like he's not just one of those big O linemen that throws his body at the defensive line. He is a very strong man. We watched that one video where he jumped out of the pool.
Yeah, he's literally standing at the bottom of a pool. Now, granted, it's 3 feet. It's a 3-foot pool. You know, a lot of people are going to point that out. But the man just straight up jumped out of a pool and landed on the pavement like it was nothing. He didn't use his hands. He didn't do nothing. Just sprung out of the pool with his legs. I mean, what kind of 320-pound man is doing that? Let alone a regular. You know, someone who's a lesser size like myself. I weigh 175. You don't see me jumping out of pools.
Dude, if I tried jumping like that, one, I'd break my teeth on the ledge of the pool. Like I'd fall forward. I can barely climb out normally. Just, you know what I mean? You lift your leg up, you push yourself up. Let alone jumping out like that, I can barely climb out of a pool. Like, I know I'm kind of outing myself, but give the man credit. And I know it's 3 feet in the water, but I want to see some average Joe try that. You will fall on your face.
I couldn't jump out of half a foot of water, let alone 3 feet, all right? I'm telling you, this guy is a freak athlete. Unbelievable. I still cannot get over the fact that he fell to the Bucks, well, he didn't fall to 14, but San Francisco, I'm not sure they would have taken him because they had a Trent Williams deal kind of in place to replace Joe Staley. And, but so they had to go up one spot to get their guy. And I think Jason Light and Bruce Arians did absolutely the right thing by ensuring that Tristan Wirfs is going to be the right tackle of this team for a very long time. A brilliant pick, if you ask me.
Agreed. And you know what was also a pretty brilliant pick? And the one that honestly impressed me the most over Tristan Wirfs is the number 2 one, Antoine Winfield, the safety out of Minnesota.
His dad was a long-time safety in the NFL, too.
Honestly, a lot of times the kids of players can end up being so much greater than their dads. And
I've been paid to me like compared to Archie.
I've been looking at this guy's numbers. Dude was basically the top safety of the Big Ten Conference.
Well, dude, I mean, I'm just going to be real. This guy, the more I watch, the more highlights, the more tape I watch of him. I mean, this guy he is an animal. And people are going to say he's undersized, 5'9.5", yada, yada, yada. Who cares?
That was the only downside. I saw that game-winning interception against Fresno State.
He plays bigger than he is, all right? The man is an animal. He balls out all over the place. 7 interceptions. I mean, led the Big Ten, I believe. And, you said he was the Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year. I mean, this guy, he's, again, another incredible athlete who moves sideline to sideline so well. And, it's just his vision. He plays so well. And a lot of analysts had him as a first-round pick. And the fact that he fell to 45 of the Bucks, it might even be better than Wirfs falling and them getting him at 13 because Antoine Winfield might be the safety they need in that secondary. I like Jordan Whitehead. I think Mike Edwards has potential. But I'm telling you, Antoine Winfield is coming for a job in that secondary, and he might be a key cog if he can stay healthy. He had injury problems in the past. He played the full year at Minnesota this past year, but before that he had injuries. But if he can stay healthy, he might be a key cog in that secondary for a long time.
And, in the last episode of SS Tampa Bay when we did the mock drafts, we both had the Bucks getting a running back. I think they were still originally going to do that. But when Antoine Winfield was available, they took their plans, ripped up, and said, we got to take this guy. Because you have to take him if he's there. Sometimes you just got to.
I got to be honest. The Bucks, I think the second that Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor were off the board, the Bucks wiped their hands clean and said, a running back can wait. They saw Winfield on the board. I heard multiple reports that they were not very high on J.K. Dobbins in the first place. That's what I heard. I heard they thought he was not a very good pass blocker, and a lot of people felt the same way. That's why he slid so far in the second round. His pass blocking was not one of his strengths. It just wasn't, and he wasn't as good as a pass catcher as some of these other running backs. And that's just the truth. As a pure runner, I'm not sure there was anyone better in the draft. But that's not what the Bucks were looking for. They were looking for someone who could pass block and who can be an effective player in the passing game from the running back position, which leads us to the third pick, Keyshawn Vaughn, the running back at Vanderbilt, which those are two of his strengths, pass blocking and playing as a receiver out of the backfield or even lining up as in the slot as a receiver.
And you know what? Despite the fact that he played for Vanderbilt, he actually looked really good. If you put him on any other team, he might have rushed double the yards he had. He had over 1,000 yards, by the way. 10 plus all-purpose touchdowns in 2 years.
It's hard to argue. The fact of the matter is this man played behind one of the worst offensive lines in the SEC, let alone the NCAA. He had to make his own holes. This man, over 2 seasons at Vanderbilt averaged, I want to say, over 5 yards a carry, maybe over 6. And, when you talk about Vanderbilt and you talk about their offensive line, you talk about their offensive playmakers, there's really not a lot to work with. And, there's not a lot of playmakers on that offense, whether it's from the quarterback position, the wide receiver, offensive line, tight end. Vanderbilt's not exactly an offensive powerhouse. And this man was able to, put up some incredibly impressive numbers, and he put a lot of good stuff on tape despite playing for Vanderbilt.
I had a friend text me after that draft pick flat said, with those numbers playing for Vanderbilt, he's legit.
It's hard to argue.
That's the argument you really need. If you rush 1,000 yards playing for Vanderbilt, I guarantee if he comes to Florida, he rushes 1,800.
Well, it's going to be interesting for him because something that is I think something should be noted is his history at Illinois. He started 5 games there as a freshman. He put up some impressive numbers, and then his second year, sophomore year, is when ex-Bucks coach Lovie Smith arrived. And that was it for him at Illinois. Lovie, I guess, was not a very big fan of Mr. Vaughn. Keyshawn Vaughn was not a very big fan of it. He didn't see the field nearly as much. I want to say he only played 60, or he only got 60 carries, 60 snaps.
He didn't have a lot of time. That was his first year. Was the first year under Lovie Smith. I think he rushed like 500 yards, and that's it.
It was ridiculous. He did not get nearly the amount of carries that he does freshman. So he said, "All right, I'm out of here. I'm going to transfer," and went to Vanderbilt and was incredibly productive. So it's a lot of people are going to say, "Well, I don't know who Keyshawn Vaughn is." Well, not a lot of people do. Who watches Vanderbilt outside of Vanderbilt fans? Now, you and me, we go to an SEC school in Florida, so maybe we've had a little bit more privilege to watch the Gators whoop up on Vanderbilt. But I watched a little bit of Vanderbilt football, whether it's when they play a high-profile school like Georgia, or last year they played Notre Dame, which in a game where they nearly won, and then they played Florida. And Keyshawn Vaughn, every time I watched him out of the backfield, this man was the most impressive player on the field. I feel like he's legit. I hope a lot of people are going to end up seeing that too.
The weird thing about Vanderbilt last season, they put up more points against LSU than Florida. They scored 38 points. That was what gave me hope against them in Death Valley, was the fact that Vanderbilt, if they can put up 38, I thought we could put up at least 45. I was very wrong.
Yeah.
All very wrong.
Yeah.
Talk about it because when I was talking about Florida football, we're talking about Buccaneer football.
Right. Well, Keyshawn Vaughn, the man against Vanderbilt, I want to say he had 120 yards and 2 touchdowns total. It's not like this man is producing against, Chattanooga or no-name schools. He's producing against legitimate SEC schools. He's dropping numbers. He's dropping great numbers against the national champions. I'm not saying LSU had the best defense in the country last year. Not even close. You could say their defense was average to what it's been in
the
past.
Best offense in the history of college football, or you can argue.
Yes, but they didn't. The defense didn't necessarily match. They had an okay defense, not a great one. But still, this is a man.
That's the best way to describe it.
But this man's still playing SEC schools, and he's playing well. He's still playing SEC defenses and legitimate ones. He's playing well, which gives me hope. To give you a comparison of the kind of player he kind of reminds me of, Benny Snell, the running back who got out of Kentucky, who got drafted by the Steelers last year in the 4th round. Kind of a similar build, similar game. I liked Snell a lot coming into the draft last year, and he played admirably in James Conner's absence. When James Conner got hurt, I felt Snell filled in there pretty well. I feel like he was probably the primary focus of for a lot of defenses because, quite frankly, Pittsburgh last year on the offensive side of the ball, without Roethlisberger, to injuries at receiver, not lack of playmakers at receiver, without Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster was the only one there. It's kind of hard, but I felt like he played well at times. So there's a comparison for you.
Yeah, I also saw Benny Snell Jr. absolutely carve up the Gators in the one loss since 1986.
Yeah.
That was the reason why Kentucky won that game. I'm not saying Florida was great on offense. We were not.
Oh, not by any stretch of the imagination.
Through the Gator defense that helped the Gators finish number 7 in the AP poll that year. He ran right through them and ran for over 200 yards.
Listen, Benny Snell in college was a beast. And, you can argue that Keyshawn Vaughn, behind a less than average, a very, not even mediocre, let's just straight up say it, a very bad offensive line at Vanderbilt, a very bad offense in general at Vanderbilt. He was the only shining star on that team, let alone offense. And I felt, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I really do. I really feel strongly about that. I think that this was a very good pick. I think he's very underrated. I think people are going to be very surprised by what they see. And Ronald Jones, I like Ronald Jones. I felt he improved a lot, but he might need to watch himself if Vaughn plays to half of what he did. Not even half, but if he played to his capability of what he did at Vanderbilt, I think that he could definitely be someone who can make noise out of the backfield.
I agree. And you know what? Another big surprise? If you're a Tampa Bay fan, you're probably going to take a double take at the next name because I definitely did too.
This is my favorite pick of the draft.
Might be my favorite pick in about 10 years just because, I'm a Tampa Bay sports nut. I'm going to make the announcement right here. In the fifth round, the Buccaneers, I almost said the wrong team because of it. It's a wide receiver out of Minnesota, Tyler Johnson.
Which, like you said, we do a double take because we think of one of our favorite centermen, one of our favorite hockey players in the world, from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Tyler Johnson. All right, so the Rays are the Rays are next. They're the only Tampa Bay team without a Tyler Johnson.
They need to scout Tyler Johnson that plays baseball. If they
don't,
they're doing it wrong.
So it's more than the name for me. Obviously Tyler Johnson, it's fun. You think, oh, let's get them together. 2 Tyler Johnsons in Tampa Bay. They should start a YouTube channel. They should do so much together. It'd be fun, which it would be. Don't get me wrong, it would be. But it's Tyler Johnson, the receiver, that gets me excited because this guy in a draft class that was just so loaded at receiver, the Bucs might have found a real gem in the 5th round, and they needed a 3rd receiver. They lost Brashad Perriman. It was granted a small hole to fill, not like we need, the Bucs need many more weapons for Brady.
It's not like you lost Mike Evans.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even Cameron Brate.
Exactly.
I know Brate's tight end, but still.
But this could be an incredible value pick for the Bucs, and a really good player that could develop into a really, really solid NFL receiver with some coaching. Minnesota's not exactly a football powerhouse, although they had one of their best seasons in decades last year, in a year where they made the Outback Bowl. I believe they beat Auburn in the Outback Bowl.
They did. They won by
I want to say it was a 10-2 season in which they beat Auburn in the Outback Bowl. That's nothing to scoff at, but Tyler Johnson.
I'll put it at this. The Bucs definitely took full advantage of the fact that they host the Outback Bowl every year at Raymond James Stadium. And they ended up with 2 of the better players in the Big Ten last season, both of them which led the entire conference in some categories. Tyler Johnson led the Big Ten in both receiving yards and receiving touchdowns last year. That's not nothing. The Big Ten is it's probably second to the SEC right now.
Yeah, I would say so.
And I know they play for Minnesota, but that doesn't matter. You lead the Big Ten in something that's pretty big.
It's not like Minnesota's not playing any talent. They went 10-2 in what was a pretty strong Big Ten conference last year.
Penn State.
You're playing Ohio State. You're playing Michigan. You're playing Penn State. You're playing Iowa. You're playing, you're gonna laugh at this one, Nebraska. Nebraska's not very good, but they were ranked at a point. You're playing Michigan State. You're playing good teams. You're playing Wisconsin.
It's not normally a bad conference. Like if you beat, beating Purdue is kind of like beating Kentucky, but most of these teams, if you go 10-2 in the Big Ten, that's an accomplishment.
The fact of the matter is this man led a conference in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns, and in a conference that's pretty loaded on talent. I mean, and there's some good defenses in that conference too. Wisconsin, really good defense. Michigan, really good defense. Ohio State, really good defense. And Penn State, good defense. I mean, this man, and it's such an underrated pick to me. This man, I mean, I love him as a route runner. He's a very clean route runner. He finds cushions in zone coverage. He's not the fastest player in the world, but he's such a clean route runner. He finds a way to create separation. He, as a pure receiver, is based on the tape, I think the Bucs found a diamond in the rough in the 5th round.
I agree. And you know what? We're not even done with the Big Ten for the Bucs because the next pick comes out of Nebraska. Even though we just kind of insulted them, we took one of their players.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you want to talk about Keyshawn Vaughn, he started his career at Illinois. So I mean, first round through 6th round, the Bucs took technically, if you want to talk about if you want to talk about it, kind of in a way, technically took only Big Ten players.
Connected to the Big Ten. That's probably the way to word it.
It's another way to word it. It's super interesting though, the fact that they scouted the Big Ten the way they did. But
anyway, I think it really worked out for them because while everyone else spreads out their scouts and tries to look everywhere, they said, let's just focus on one place. Let's take advantage of the fact that we host Big Ten teams and SEC. I mean, they grabbed still an SEC player. I'm not going to say Keyshawn Vaughn's an SEC player.
Well, it's not to say they only scouted Big Ten players because obviously they didn't. It's just the way that the board kind of fell in favor. They were able to end up with some really good Big Ten talent. And, it follows up 6th round pick, Khalil Davis out of Nebraska.
Yeah. And it's really hard once you get in this round to really find info on these guys. A lot of their Wikipedia pages were made on the spot the second they got drafted. I know that for a fact because I looked them up.
Mm-hmm.
Khalil Davis, I really dug into his combine info. He ran a 40 in 4.75 seconds. That was the 6th fastest for a defensive lineman just because we had mentioned that was his position. And he was declared D lineman of the year for 2 years. That's the info I could find.
Well, let's talk about it. 6th round picks, unless you really want to talk about the Tom Brady's of the world, more times than not,
we know the reality.
We know that, but this typically, if you're drafted in the 6th round, what you're there for is special teams and depth. You're not there to be the next big guy. Occasionally, some of them pan out and they turn out to be more than what you think. Obviously, if you're a Bucs fan, you're hoping Khalil Davis pans out to be, the next Ndamukong Suh. Is that the reality? Probably not. He's probably here to provide defensive line depth and play special teams. But you can hope. And his speed, his quickness as a pass rusher, he's not particularly strong in the run game. But, his speed as a pass rusher and his speed is going to help him a lot.
I agree. You know what? It never hurts to have the depth either. Players get injured. The Bucs at times weren't exactly the best with special teams.
Right.
Some of these guys doesn't hurt. And, the next 2 guys we talk about is probably the same thing. But you know what? Let's just get to those, knock them out, and get to our next topic.
Exactly. 7th round. Kick us off, Harrison. Let's do it.
Well, let's just kind of talk about them together because they're both in the same round. The Bucs had 2 7th round picks, one of the ones that they got from the Patriots, and then you have one that you technically got from San Francisco, but you already had it. They swapped 7th round picks to move up one spot to get Tristan Wirf. We have out of Temple linebacker Chappelle Russell, and then you have Louisiana Lafayette running back Raymond Calais. I think it's pronounced Calais.
Calais, and he, out of the 2 7th round picks, he's the one that interests me the most. The running back out of Louisiana Lafayette, Raymond Calais. I don't know if you listen to Bruce Arians after the draft concluded, but he referred to Raymond Calais as a much smaller but faster David Johnson.
Elaborate.
Now, as we know, 2015 draft, the Cardinals in the 3rd round were able to pick up David Johnson, and he turned out to be, at least for a few years with Bruce Arians, a stud, arguably the best running back in the NFL. When you talk about well-rounded running backs as a pure runner, as the threat he was in the passing game, pass blocking, he was number 1 pick in a lot of fantasy football boards. I can tell you that much. But with Raymond Calais, I'm going to be honest. I don't necessarily agree. He's very quick, incredibly fast. That's something that that can be said about him. He excels in open space. So could he be a threat in the passing game? He could if he makes the team. The issue with him as a runner with Calais, he's not very patient. He doesn't wait for blocks to develop. He tries to use his speed to get around an edge. He tries to hit a hole too quick, and it ends up hurting him. But I personally think that this is another pick that's going to benefit the Bucs on special teams mostly. I think Calais' strengths are his speed and his quickness in open space, and that could be used, as a punt returner or a kick returner. I think he excels in open space, and if you can channel that, he could be an effective running back in the NFL. But he's very undersized. But I think you might get the most value out of him as a return man.
And if it means anything about Calais, in 2018, and I'm just going to say before I actually read the stats, he never rushed 1,000 yards. The most he ever rushed was about 780. But when he carried the ball, he took off. In
Right.
2018, 9.3 yards per carry. In 2019, 7.6 yards per carry. That's double probably what is considered above average for a carry.
Oh, well, let's not kid ourselves. He's playing in the Sun Belt. He's not necessarily.
I know, but
He's not playing in the SEC. But if a guy can play, he can play. I don't necessarily know if the conference matters. I'm sure you've had plenty. There's been plenty of good players who have come out of small schools, whether it's the Sun Belt Conference, Division II, Division III. There's been good players. So I'm not going to take that away from 9.3 yards per rush. Is very impressive, understandably. But I'm not sure that's necessarily going to hold up against NFL defenses.
probably not.
Especially if he doesn't have patience to wait for blocks to develop.
If it translates to the NFL, maybe it ends up just being 3.5. We could be wrong. Who knows? Maybe it's just a punt returner who returns kickoffs because he's that fast. And it might make more sense for him anyway because he's got that wide open space where he just catch the ball and take off.
Yeah. But, like I said, the thing that might hurt him the most, and it's coachable. I think patience is coachable. Obviously you don't necessarily have high hopes for a 7th round pick. It's just kind of, when you get to the 7th round, it's just kind of who you think could potentially have a little something, but more likely than not, they're not going to be there very long. But I mean, he could stick around if he excels on special teams.
I agree. And with that, Zach, I think that wraps up our draft talk.
Yeah. Overall, I would say the Bucs definitely they had themselves a very solid draft. I'd give them a B+, A- somewhere in that range.
I gave him an A-, and like I said at the beginning, Sports Illustrated gave him an A- too. So I'm going to, how you call it?
I think it's fair grade.
Force that rating.
I think it's fair grade.
I did.
Yeah. Anyway, Harrison, take us into our next topic. Let's talk about it.
All right. Well, we haven't had a chance to talk about this at all, really, in our podcast. Yep. And here it is, hockey. We finally get to talk some hockey. Ain't that great?
Well, it's amazing. I mean, I've been a Lightning season ticket holder for years now. Me and my family, we love the Bolts. I've been going to games since I was a little kid. My dad grew up in New York. He was a big Rangers fan, and then when he moved down here, Lightning got established in '92. He became a hockey. He didn't become a hockey fan. He's always been a hockey fan, but he became a Bolts fan. Raised me up to be that way. So I'm a big NHL guy, but just with the coronavirus, haven't really gotten the chance to talk much hockey because there's really just not much to talk about. Everything's been up in the air since the NHL kind of postponed the season. So it's exciting that we got something to talk about.
And honestly, it's basically been the first major hockey update since sports went away on March 12th. And just for some of my own hockey background, since we talked about it, my dad's from Montreal, love the Montreal Canadiens. Talked about hockey instead of giving bedtime stories like the normal ones. He used to talk about Henri Richard, Jean Beliveau, Ken Dryden. I'm still a Lightning fan. You raised me right.
You see, my hockey stories when I was a kid. I was still 5-6 years old when the Lightning made their Cup run in 04. So I mean, my stories, I kind of knew them, but I don't really remember watching them. My hockey stories consist of Marty St. Louis' double overtime winner in Game 6 over the Flames to force the Game 7. Arguably, not even arguably, actually, it is the biggest goal in Tampa Bay history. Not even close.
It's the reason why Martin St. Louis is the greatest player in Tampa Bay history. He's one, our Hall of Famer. That pretty much sums it up. But
Yeah.
4 playoff overtime goals for the Lightning. That's top 5 in NHL history. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah. Marty was clutch. He was dominant, and my favorite Lightning player of all time. I love Marty St. Louis, and he deserves to have that 26 hanging inside Amalie Arena, right now. Him and Vinny LeCavier are up there, and I'm sure other players will join him, but Marty St. Louis deserved to have his 26 up there first, without a doubt.
Very fitting that 26 and number 4 are both up there at the same time, because they were on the team together for 12 years before they were split up. It's only
a long time.
First major duo in Tampa Bay history had the banners go up together.
Well, they were such a dominant duo for a long time. I mean, I remember watching them in all-star games year in, year out. They were so good for so long, and they are beloved here in Tampa, and they always will be. And not only for myself, but every hockey fan in Tampa Bay that either got to watch them play or didn't, but gets to see the highlights will understand just how good they are and how special they are to all of us Lightning fans. But enough about our past in hockey. Let's talk about what's currently going on in the NHL. Are we going to get Lightning hockey back? Because you know what, when things went away, this team was on the brink of another playoff berth, and they're looking for a little redemption from last year, from that 4-game sweep at the hands of the Columbus Blue Jackets.
I'd rather not talk about that, Zach. I'd rather talk about 2019. As a Lightning fan, anytime I hear about 2018, I just get enraged. But I'm going to calm down. Here we go. So here's the news that we have for you today. Yesterday, there was a tweet by a former NHL player, John Scott, who just dropped out of nowhere, just saying, training camp is starting June 1st. European players are returning soon. #breaking.
What level of credibility is there to this?
We're not sure, but it was enough to get everyone stirring. I don't know why he would just make that up. For all we know, he's an insider that we don't know. He has his own podcast that people listen to.
I mean, some people just like to stir up the news and get attention. If there is any sort of
thing to just get started, and it's not the craziest thing in the world because we have other sources talking about a return too. Just let me finish.
If there is any credibility to this, that's a big deal. That means we're only about a month away from the NHL really opening back up, which means we should, notice the word should, get an announcement relatively soon about their plan going forward.
Yes, and I will say most of the information I'm telling you is stuff that was pieced together. A lot of this information, I dug up the sources myself. I follow this YouTuber called The Hockey Guy. He's great.
I've heard The Hockey Guy. I love The Hockey Guy. He's great. His videos are amazing.
Yes, and he lined up all the sources, looked up the one from the Score where the players' workouts are supposed to begin May 15th. They had some quotes from Gary Bettman, too. A little more credible because a lot of people follow the Score, get their news and their highlights and everything.
Right.
Definitely has some validity to it. If the source from the Score didn't exist, I might think it was a little overhyped.
Yeah.
And one thing that we have here is they plan on bringing the season back around July 1st, which happens to be Canada Day.
Right.
Happy Canada Day to everyone in advance. You have 3 weeks of regular season starting in July. You have a Stanley Cup playoff that goes all the way through September. You have a condensed off season. Quickly get through arbitration, free agency, whatever you need to do. They say the draft might still be in June, right before the season comes back into play. It's kind of like baseball, but for one season. And you start the season back up again next season in November to try to get everything back on schedule, where it would have to be a slightly shorter season. Even if you get rid of the All-Star break, you won't have enough time for 82 games. That's a whole month off the calendar.
Yeah.
72 instead of 82.
I can go off what I've heard and what I know. From what I've heard, the NHL is very intent on finishing the regular season. And that's 3 weeks of hockey. I don't know if they want to condense the regular season schedule to a way to where they can wrap it up in like 2 weeks maybe and then roll. But in terms of the NHL, I know they're very intent on finishing the regular season and then jumping into the playoffs. To me, if you start June 1st, you get 3 weeks of training camp followed by 3 weeks of regular season. That gets you a mid-July start for the playoffs, and like you said, at that point you wrap up the Stanley Cup if you don't change the format at all by about early mid-September. That's when you finish it up. That's when you wrap it up, and then it's a quick turnaround to start the next season by November. I'm not sure how plausible that is in terms of if you want to play a full 82 games or if you're willing to shorten it. But that's a really quick turnaround, Harrison. That's incredibly quick.
A lot of the teams had just been playing for quite a bit, so you really don't need as long of an off season or a preseason for that matter anyway. You need the regular season games no matter what. You can't just jump into a playoff from training camp. It could cause a lot of havoc. A lot of storylines are changing. You need to let the regular season play out. Give teams a chance to, especially when the wild cards are even at 81 points apiece in the Eastern Conference. You can't leave it. You gotta let everything sort itself out. Make sure players get fully back into the game before you start a playoff.
It's definitely interesting. And I know the NFL is going to need a concise plan on how they want to approach this. But for some teams, like if you're the Detroit Red Wings right now, what's the point of playing 6 more weeks for what's essentially a lost season? I mean, you're not making the playoffs. You're already mathematically eliminated. So, instead of resting your body, what's the point of risking an injury, for 3 weeks of training and 3 weeks of hockey when you can just sit there, wrap up the season, focus on next year, and not have that risk. And you can spend time with your family instead of, isolating yourself, especially if they go into this 4-city plan. What's the point?
I'll tell you this. There's a financial incentive. You still have the TV money involved. Players' salaries are involved. And I know there's the whole talk, players are rich anyway. No one just leaves money on the table. The NHL is one of the leagues that needs this season to come back the most. If they cancel this season, it could be devastating financially for this league. The Florida Panthers last year lost $21 million. Imagine if they didn't get those extra 10 games from TV money. It could be a lot worse. Some teams that barely get into the black, if they don't play a couple of playoff rounds, are going to go into the negative. Some owners might just say, and I mean, this is a little extreme, if we end up with a financial crisis afterwards because of the coronavirus, some owner might say, we're not operating this year. And you still have to worry about Seattle coming in. You need to matters.
I don't think the NHL is ever going to come to a point where a team's going to be like, I'm just suspending operations. The team's not going to play this year. That's not going to happen. The NHL provides provides each team with a certain set amount of money. That's what TV revenue is about. The fact of the matter is, no team is just going to sit out a season. That's not going to happen.
They don't have the money to operate. They might have to. It's happened before.
The NHL will provide them the money to operate. The team's just sitting out.
I'm just saying, it shows why you need the money from this season. It increases the chances of not having this happen.
But to me, it's here's the thing. Any proposal put forth by the NHL is going to have to be approved by the Players Association. No matter what, you have to get the approval of the Players Association. And a lot of players are going to look at it like, why am I spending 6 extra weeks for teams that are out of it? The LA Kings, the San Jose Sharks, the Anaheim Ducks, the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings of the world, the New Jersey Devils. Why would they look at it as they're gonna? I can't help but imagine that they're gonna look at it from the scenario of, why am I putting my body and my you can say career at risk for 6 weeks of meaningless hockey? They're not playing for a Stanley Cup. They're not playing for a playoff spot. Essentially, at that point, they're paying for a pay. 6 weeks of a paycheck. A lot of these players have made a majority of their money. They've played 70 out of the 82 games. A lot of them might not see the incentive.
Can you even start a season without all the teams playing, though? If some of the teams just say, we're out of it, we don't care, you have no choice but to just jump into the playoff, announce division winners and wild card winners.
Exactly.
You can't reshuffle this. You can't reshuffle the schedule like that. So it's either everyone's in, or you jump into the playoff, or you just don't have a season. It just doesn't work that way, where teams can just say, oh, well, what's in it for me? it doesn't.
Well, ultimately, that's what's going to happen with the players. They have to see the incentive. If the Players Association is going to, be with the NHL on a plan going forward. So I mean, it's complicated, and the NHL is going to need to have a very good plan going forward into how they're going to do this. But to me, I don't think they're going to cancel the season. I ultimately do think the players, many of them, want to finish this season, especially the ones that were having a very good season, be it the Boston Bruins, the Blues looking to go back-to-back, the Lightning. We're having a great season before everything, got postponed. So there's a lot of players out there that want to finish this thing up and get a Stanley Cup champion. But, there's going to be some roadblocks, to say the least.
But from the way it seems the players want to play,
Yeah.
one of the earliest proposals, which involved a July return, was actually proposed by the players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think most of them are willing to come back and finish. I mean, even virus aside, you don't just with 70 games and averages decide, why should I keep playing and risk an injury for meaningless games? These games happen all the time. And I know the stop of the season and come back. But the argument's still the same. Like at any point, I think for a lot of players, just wouldn't look good either. Like, can you imagine the PR hell some of them would go through this? Don't play. They would get a lot of support due to the situation. But I think either everyone comes back or they can't do it.
Yeah, the only issue with jumping right to the playoffs for me, I don't have so much of an issue with maybe doing training camp for only the playoff teams, then maybe playing a couple exhibition games just for these guys to get their legs back. I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I think what it ultimately comes down to is how are you going to tell teams like the New York Islanders that are only a point back of a playoff spot, but have 2 games in hand on the second wildcard team, you don't qualify for the playoffs because you technically, when the season ended, you're the 9th seed. How are you going to tell a team that when they, if all games were to be played equally, they better chances than not are that last playoff team. I mean, it's just hard to justify that unless you finish that season.
Bring every team back. The Islanders might play the Kings or the Red Wings. I don't know their exact schedule. They might play a bottom dweller team. You can't just give them the win or declare it.
Those points matter. Yeah.
So they have to come back whether they like it or not. That's all I have to say. But on the bright side for the Lightning, they'll have Steven Stamkos when they get back.
Yeah, Steven Stamkos. Stammer's going to be back if there is a season or, next season. Stammer is healthy. He's good to go. He had that surgery at the beginning of March, and it looked like he was going to not come back until, at the very least, the beginning of the playoffs, which would have been
right now
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago would have been the beginning of the playoffs, and who knows if the Lightning would still even be alive right now had the playoffs gone on as scheduled. But whenever this thing does start again, Stammer, team captain, one of the top scorers in the NHL, will be ready.
And actually, round 2 would be starting around now. The Athletic is currently kind of doing a simulation for if the playoffs had gone on as normal.
How the Lightning do?
The Lightning would be playing the Bruins right now, which I think happens anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't say it almost seems inevitable because we said that last year, and we'll look at the Lightning got swept by Columbus. But I mean, when you look at it on paper in terms of who had the better rosters, Lightning play the Maple Leafs, Bruins play a wild card team. It's
Columbus Blue Jackets actually.
Oh, ironically,
happens to be
how ironic would it be for the Lightning to win their series, Boston to lose to Columbus, and the Lightning take out Columbus in the playoffs? How weird? How would that kind of matchup? Oh man, that'd be
ready to beat the crap out of every Blue Jackets player. Sorry, that's not the correct team. We're talking hockey here. The Columbus Blue Jackets.
I mean, the headline would be insane.
They have a chip on their shoulder. That's the biggest thing for the Lightning in this playoff. They have a lot to prove, not just to the hockey world, but to themselves. They want to say, we're capable of winning a cup.
And they added some serious grit at the trade deadline too. Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, Zach Bogosian, a lot of players who and even Patrick Maroon, they added him at the beginning of the season. A lot of players who come in there and come playoff time, they're ready to hit someone.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, but they're not the only league with some drama.
Yeah,
When they come back, baseball's having it too, and they're saying they're gonna have a season no matter what. This is a segue into the next topic.
yeah.
They have a new plan. It's more of a leaked plan. It was big enough CBS Sports reported it, and so did Sports Illustrated. So we've talked about playing games in only Arizona. The biggest talk we had was the Florida-Arizona plan last 2 episodes ago, I believe.
I believe so.
Yes, where they had like the whole division set up and everything. This one doesn't have any information besides they're adding Arizona, Florida, Texas. And the big reason behind that is there's dome stadiums. Tropicana Field's suddenly worth something to baseball.
Yeah.
They call it a garbage can. LOL, Houston Astros. And then suddenly they're like, "Oh, you have a dome. Let's play in you." And the Rays are like,
the thing about this plan though, it's not really all that different from the other two proposed. All it does is add Texas to the mix. But I think the main question mark we have is how are they going to align the teams? Essentially. I mean, are you going to have maybe like the AL East and the NL East play all their games in Florida? Maybe have your Central divisions play in Texas, and then your West divisions out in Arizona. That could be the setup.
It could be, but you still couldn't have the American League and the National League because you only have the divisions to play each other at that point. It really would be a weird setup in that sense.
You could play interleague.
I mean, you have interleague, but it's like I know we're in unprecedented times. The options could be with 3 locations, 10, 10, 10. You could have something completely uneven. I think if you want a full season, it's going to be a lot of games against the same teams. It would be like when you had 8 teams in the American League and 8 teams in the National League before 1961, where you just played every team in your league 22 times a year. That's how you get to 154 games.
Well, let's be honest with ourselves. I don't necessarily see the MLB getting to a point where they play, a full season. I think hear me out. All right.
Like 124 games.
As it is, you play your each division opponent 18 times on the road, 3 series apiece. If you do that in your current setup, if you put each team in its division, in Florida, Texas, Arizona, and they play each other 18 times, that's 72 games. Now let's say you play 102 games instead of 162. You shorten the season to 102 games, and you play an interleague division 6 games apiece. An interleague team, 5 teams, 6 games, 2 series, 1 at home, 1 away. That gets you to 102 games, and with a shortened season, 100 games might be all you need. 100, 102, something like that. That could be a scenario that would work.
You need at least 100 games. Mariano Rivera said at some point you cannot decide a champion with like 60 games, and I agree. It works in hockey.
But I think 100, a little over 100 games is enough to determine who's legit, who's not, who's playoff worthy, who's not.
I agree, and you know what? Every sport has more than enough games to determine who's playoff worthy. Football could probably do it in 12. Baseball could do it in 105. And the NHL and NBA could probably do it in about 60. Because, it's all sample size.
Yeah, I would say so. And with the MLB, it's just a matter of determining how are you going to set up the schedule and, ultimately who's playing where and who are they playing. Yeah, I think the division and interleague situation could be something that works where you sit there and you play your normal round division games, 3 series each 6 series apiece between division opponents, 3 at home, 3 away, and then 2 series apiece with an interleague division. And let's say in the Rays case, the NL East, you play the Phillies, the Braves, the Nationals, the Mets, and the Marlins, 2 times apiece, 1 home, 1 away. and it gets you to a little over 100 games. I think that might be a scenario that is. I think that's a scenario that's definitely worth exploring.
I'm intrigued by the proposal of 3 states. I say this is the one that's the least likely to happen. It just does not make sense to spread out the teams that much unless, well, I get the priority safety. In theory, if you spread them out, you prevent certain teams from getting infected as much if they're not all together.
Yeah.
I just think for the sake of being able to play enough teams and have like a real true setup, I think the Florida-Arizona plan makes the most sense with a Grapefruit League and a Cactus League.
Yeah, I mean, also, it's gonna make the playoffs maybe a little more complicated. Not that much. You're just adding an extra stadium, so an extra place to travel. But I mean, Florida and Arizona, at that point, all you're doing is traveling back and forth. And as in the case of a World Series, you're traveling back and forth between Tropicana Field and Chase Field. And besides that, the playoffs can really be handled in one. The regular season and playoffs can be handled in one state up until the point of the World Series. With the postseason, if you do like in a divisional alignment like I suggested in the American League and National League, you're putting a little more travel on these players, and you're putting them a little bit more at risk when you travel in the postseason. Let's say the Rays make the playoffs. Let's say they're a wild card team. They play the winner of the AL Central again, like last year, but maybe this time it's last year. I'm sorry, they played the winner of the AL West in the Astros. Let's say they got a date with Cleveland, and Cleveland's playing out there in Texas. All of a sudden, you're traveling back and forth between Texas for a series. ALCS, you might be traveling back and forth with another team for a series. Then you got to travel back and forth for the World Series. It's a lot more travel than just one series between a winner of a Grapefruit League and a Cactus League. And at that point, you are putting players at risk. And, who's to say that if a World Series happens by November or December, things aren't better? At that point, it might be safe, but then again, it might not. We don't know. And you can only think in the time being you can really only put yourself in the mindset of, we don't want to put these players at risk, and we need to limit travel. And I'm not sure that a 3-state plan is the way to go about it.
And you know what? I think since you're talking about the playoffs, I might as well throw this in there. The solution might be found from a completely different baseball league on the other side of the planet in Korea. The KBO has this other setup in which they have a 144-game season. They play with no fans. Grant, Korea is a much smaller country compared to the entire United States of America. But you play through November. Halfway through the month of November, when you get deep enough into the playoffs, everything's at one neutral site location in the capital city of Seoul.
Mm-hmm.
I can see Major League Baseball doing something similar. Granted, they're not all playing in their home stadiums, but at some point in the playoffs, maybe they all play at Tropicana Field or Chase Field or maybe Globe Life Park or Globe Life Stadium, whatever the new one's called. It's the same sponsor, but like a slightly tweaked name. I can tell you they're not going to Marlins Park because of the health risks.
Yeah. I think the health risk in Miami is much greater than I would say right now it is in Phoenix or Tampa. I'm sorry, St. Petersburg. Ultimately, I mean, we can talk about with the NHL too and the NBA and the NFL, but I mean, there's just at this point in time when we're talking, there's just so many unknowns with these plans. It's hard to really say with certainty that we go through these scenarios with these leagues about reopening and us finally getting our sports back, light at the end of the tunnel. And it looks to be trending in that way. I do genuinely believe that we are going to see these plans open up, and we're going to get a set plan. How the leagues are going to do this. Is it going to work? We'll see. I think it's going to happen, but I'm optimistic. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's just so many roadblocks and issues that come up. They're really going to have to work very closely with health officials, public health officials, and the people that are in charge of making sure that these things can go smoothly. It's going to be a very difficult task, and I do not envy the people that have to make these decisions because I know I wouldn't want to be in their shoes right now. It's a lot, and there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different scenarios that they got to go through, and ultimately we'll just see what happens. We'll see what happens.
If it does make you feel better, they are working with health officials. Dr. Fauci has said a season could be played this summer. which is probably some of the best news you can get from anyone during the coronavirus pandemic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Dr. Fauci's kind of been, I guess you could say, the poster boy of this whole thing. I mean, he's probably one of the more recognizable people in the country now. And I heard a thing from the mayor of New York City said they believe that games can be played this summer as well. Probably in empty stadiums, but it's trending in that direction where it looks like things are going to hopefully be good enough to where we can get that aspect of our lives back in terms of sports. And that when we get sports back, I think that'll be reassuring to a lot of people. I think a lot of people need it to make us feel like some sense of normalcy is back, that our sports are back, the teams that we can rely on and find hope in are there to play. And it'll be exciting when they come back, and it'll be even more exciting when there's fans allowed in the stadiums. Man, I mean, I know we were talking about this the other day because I saw a video, and I don't remember what his name is. Lead play-by-play guy for the NHL on NBC Sports.
Doc Emmerich.
Yes.
That was a great video. I know which one you're talking about. I shed a tear.
I mean, he's talking about how great it's going to be when we're all back in arenas again, and when we finally hear that anthem and the players are there lined up on the blue line, and the goosebumps, the tears, the emotion that's going to be there, and it's going to be amazing. But for the time, and I can't wait for that moment when we're all allowed to kind of share that again, having sports back and being allowed to be there, with our communities, with the other fans, and it's going to be amazing. But for the time being, I think we're going to settle for just having it back in some capacity.
And you know what? I think that moment might come a little bit sooner than you think. Even if we're watching it from our television screens, the very first sporting event, whether it's baseball, hockey, or basketball, they're going to air that national anthem live as if it was a regular event. A lot of people are going to just want to stand as if they were at the event themselves. And the second you hear that national anthem, it's going to be very emotional. And you know what? You are going to feel it, even if you're not at the event yourself.
A lot of people feel it. It's going to be significant. And like I said, I think it's something that people, I would say even myself right now, a lot of people need it. A lot of people miss it. It gives us a sense that things are going to be okay again. That we're going to get back to the way we were, and that ultimately that we will continue to fight and hopefully beat the coronavirus. But Harrison, I don't think I can find a better way to end it than that. Honestly, a nice little emotional note.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a quick look back to Mike Piazza's home run in New York. They've been talking about that game a lot. We all know the idea is that very first game is going to be remembered forever. And the biggest moments for anyone, whether it's a game-winning home run, overtime goal, slam dunk in double overtime, everyone's going to remember it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the same emotions running through. It's going to be talked about for years to come. And I can't wait for it.
It's exciting times, man. It's also very devastating times, but I think exciting times are ahead, and hopefully the next time that we talk, the next time that we put on the SS Tampa podcast for all of our listeners, we'll have a little bit a clearer picture of when when our beloved sports are going to be returning, but hopefully it's soon.
And you know what? Just for those who are listening, we know we're a day late on getting this podcast out, but we had to make sure we were caught up with world updates in sports, the draft. And we'll be back at Sunday at 1 p.m. like we have been the last couple of weeks, and we won't let you down again. And with that, I think we're done here. Zach, it's been a pleasure as usual.
Harrison, always a pleasure, my friend. Can't wait for next week. Like I said, hopefully we'll have a few more updates. Hopefully we'll have a few more things to tell our listeners. But until then, everyone be safe, take care. And this was SS Tampa, episode 3. We'll be back next week.